He told her she was nothing. In the sterile gray office of the divorce lawyer on the 48th floor of
We
a
have a
Manhattan
problem.
tower,
What is it?
The merger
Marcus
is off.
Harrington told his
How?
wife
We
Mara that her
signed.
life
They
was
backed
over.
out. This is a disaster! Your
Laughed at
incompetence
her
is
and
costing
told
us
her she would be
millions!
Sir,
nothing
please, we
without
can
his
fix
money.
this.
Fix it now or you're all
Walked out
fired!
into the lobby alone and defeated, expecting her to call a cheap taxi. But Marcus waited. He waited to see her final humiliation. He just never expected the car that pulled up. He never expected the man who stepped out. And he never expected that the wife he had just discarded was the one holding all the power. The air in the conference room of Stanton and Hicks was worth more than most people's cars. It was filtered, scrubbed, and chilled to a precise 68 degrees, carrying the scent of old leather lemon oil and the faint metallic smell of ruthless ambition. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline was a jagged gray cutout against a bruised November sky. The silence in the room was a living thing, broken only by the whisper of expensive suit fabric and the quiet snick of a gold-plated pen cap being opened and closed. Mara Sullivan sat on one side of a vast mahogany table that reflected the sky like a dark, still lake. She felt like a ghost haunting her own execution. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Her coat, a simple, practical wool coat from a department store, felt like a beggar's rag draped across the back of the $10,000 leather chair. The chair was so heavy it required both hands to pull out, so deeply cushioned it seemed designed to swallow anyone who dared sit in it without power. Opposite her sat Marcus Harrington, the man who had been her husband for 12 years. Sat was a generous term. He was lounging, radiating a smug, predatory confidence that filled the room like expensive cologne applied too heavily. His $8,000 Ermenegildo Zegna suit was draped perfectly over his broad shoulders. His $30,000 Patek Philippe watch caught the cold light every time he moved his wrist, which he did often deliberately. He was not just in the room. He owned it. He owned everything in it, including, he believed, the woman across from him. Beside him, his lawyer, a silver-haired shark named Mr. Sterling, pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. The sound of paper on wood was obscene in its finality. Sterling was the kind of man who had never lost, mostly because he only took cases that were already won. His reputation preceded him like a cold wind. When Sterling took your case, your opponent might as well pack their belongings and leave town. The lawyer's voice was a smooth, cultured baritone that belied the venom in his words. By signing here, Ms. Sullivan, you acknowledge the lump sum payment of $50,000 as a full, final, and irrevocable settlement of all spousal support claims, present, future, and potential. You also waive any and all claims to Mr. Harrington's businesses, properties, holdings, and private collections as enumerated in Exhibit A. Mara's own lawyer, a kind but spectacularly outgunned public interest attorney named Rachel Kim, flinched. Rachel's suit was polyester, and her briefcase was worn at the corners. She looked, Mara thought, with a pang of guilt, like a rowboat next to a destroyer. The metaphor was not comforting. Rowboats sank in storms. Destroyers did not. Rachel's voice trembled slightly. Marcus, this is insulting. $50,000 after 12 years, Mara supported your career. She managed your homes, your social calendar. She gave up her doctorate so you could move to New York for your first big deal. Marcus let out a short, barking laugh that bounced off the wood-paneled walls. He leaned forward, tapping his gold Mont Blanc pen on the table. Mara recognized it. She had given it to him for their 5th anniversary, back when she still believed in anniversaries, back when she still believed in him. The pen cost more than her monthly grocery budget at the time. She remembered wrapping it carefully, imagining his face when he opened it. He had smiled, kissed her cheek, and put it in his pocket without a word. Now he was using it to sign away their marriage. She gave up what? His voice dripped with theatrical disbelief. That doctorate wasn't it, in God? What was it, honey? He snapped his fingers, pretending to search for the word, enjoying the performance. Ah, yes. Florentine pigment sourcing. Are you kidding me? He turned his dismissive gaze on Rachel. Let's be blunt, Sarah. Who cares what kind of dirt they used to make the color blue 500 years ago? It's useless. Utterly, completely useless. Just like the art blog she runs. Does that even pay for the internet? Rachel's face flushed red. Her name is Rachel, not Sarah. Marcus did not correct himself. He leaned back, spreading his arms wide like a king on a throne. Let's call this what it is. Charity. I am saving her. I took her out of a dusty, rent-controlled apartment in Chicago and gave her a life she could never have dreamed of. She flew on private jets. She wore designer clothes, which, by the way, I am letting her keep, generously. She ate at restaurants you cannot even get a reservation at. This $50,000 is a golden parachute. It will get her a studio in, I don't know, Queens for a few months anyway before she has to, get a job. Can you even do that, Mara? What's the market rate for pigment sourcing? Mr. Sterling smirked. It was a practiced smirk, the kind developed over decades of watching people crumble. Rachel's voice was barely audible. You are a monster, Marcus. Marcus's good humor vanished, replaced by a cold, hard edge. I am a realist. She is 38 years old. She has no skills. She has no connections. She has no value in the marketplace. I am giving her $50,000 more than she is worth. Now sign the paper, Mara. I have a 2:00 tea time at Winged Foot with the board of Apex Holdings, and I do not intend to be late. Mara's eyes drifted from his face, from the cruel, handsome twist of his lips, to the large, abstract painting on the wall behind him. It was a terrible fake, a poor imitation of a Clifford still, all jagged, meaningless edges and no soul. It was a painting bought by the pound, designed to impress clients who knew nothing about art, but everything about its supposed price tag. Marcus had bought it for $250,000 at a charity auction, boasting about it for weeks. Mara knew from one glance it was a studio knockoff worth perhaps $1,500. She had never told him. He never would have believed her. He never believed anything she said, not about art, not about anything. She closed her eyes. A memory sharp and unwanted flashed in her mind. It was their 7th anniversary. She had just been offered a research fellowship at the Getty Museum, the culmination of her PhD work. She was ecstatic. The Getty was everything she had worked for. She told him over dinner at Per Se, the words tumbling out in a rush of excitement. Marcus had not even looked up from his phone. Los Angeles. I don't do L.A. Besides, I need you here. We're hosting the benefit for the new museum wing. You're in charge of the catering. Don't be selfish, Mara. Your little hobby can wait. It had waited. It had waited until it died. She never got another offer from the Getty. They moved on. She moved on to nothing. Mara. Rachel's voice was soft, pulling her back. We can fight. We can file for discovery. We can try to prove Mara's voice was a dry rasp. It was the first time she had spoken in over an hour. And what will that cost Rachel? How many years? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that I don't have? Rachel opened her mouth to protest. I'll work pro bono. And he will bury you in motions until you're disbarred. Mara nodded at Marcus. He'll bankrupt your little firm for sport. He's already done it. I've seen him destroy better lawyers than you for less reason than pride. She looked at her husband. You've already won, Marcus. You won the day you met me. Marcus's smile returned broader this time. See, she's smart after all. Just sign it, honey. Let's get on with our lives. Mine at least is going somewhere. Mara picked up the pen Rachel offered her. It was a cheap plastic ballpoint, its cap chewed at the edges. The contrast with Marcus's Mont Blanc was almost funny. She looked at the signature line. It read, Mara Shaw. With a slow, deliberate motion, she crossed out Shaw. She wrote her name, the name she was born with, the name she had forgotten. Mara Sullivan. The ink was black and final. Marcus boomed, clapping his hands together as he stood a conquering hero on a battlefield of paper and ink. There, it's done. Freedom for both of us. No hard feelings, L. He did not wait for an answer. He motioned to Mr. Sterling, who was already packing a pristine leather briefcase that cost more than Mara's entire settlement. Send the final bill to my office, Sterling. Good work. Let's play golf soon. Marcus walked to the door, buttoning his suit jacket with the ease of a man who had never doubted himself. He paused his hand on the heavy brass handle and looked back at Mara. She was still sitting, her hands clasped on the table, a statue of defeat. His eyes glittered with something cruel and satisfied. "Oh, and Mara, that art blog of yours, Aurelius's Attic or whatever, I had my tech guy look at it. You have 12 followers." 12. "My dog's Instagram has 5,000. He smirked. "Just a piece of advice from someone who knows. Give it up. Nobody cares. You have nothing to say." The words hung in the air like smoke. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing in the oppressive, expensive silence. Mara heard his footsteps receding down the hallway, confident and unhurried. He was whistling. For a full minute neither Mara nor Rachel moved. The room felt larger, now emptier. The fake painting on the wall seemed to mock her. $250,000 for a lie. That was Marcus. All surface, no substance. All price, no value. Rachel reached out and put a hand over Mara's. Her voice was full of a pity that Mara found harder to bear than Marcus's cruelty. "Mara, are you?" "I'm fine." Mara's voice was surprisingly steady. The numbness was a shield. "I just need to go. Thank you for everything, Rachel. The check will be mailed." Rachel's eyes were wet. "You can call me any time." "Any time at all." Mara nodded. She grabbed her simple cloth coat from the back of the chair and walked out of the room. She did not look at the fake painting. She did not look at the view of the city that Marcus had loved to show off. She just walked. She walked past the row of associate offices, past the law library, and toward the elevator bank. Her practical scuffed heel boots made no sound on the plush, mile-deep carpet. She was already a ghost. The elevator ride down was a descent into a different kind of hell. It was silent, mirrored, and played a soft, classical tune that made Mara want to scream. She could see herself reflected in every surface. A woman in a cheap coat, a woman with no makeup, a woman who looked exactly like what Marcus said she was, nothing. The elevator was empty except for her. Even the building was rejecting her. She clutched the strap of her worn leather handbag, the one Marcus had always called her orphan bag. He said it with a laugh, as if it were a joke, as if the cruelty of the word could be softened by his smile. It could not. She had stopped carrying expensive bags years ago. They made her feel like an imposter. The orphan bag at least was honest. She watched the numbers descend. 48, 40, 30, 20, 10. Each floor was a year of her marriage falling away. 12 years, 12 floors. It was almost poetic. Almost. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. The lobby of Stanton and Hicks was not a room. It was an abyss. A 3-story atrium of white Calcutta marble, brushed steel, and uncomfortable-looking leather sofas that no one in the history of the building had ever sat on. The only sign of life was a terrifyingly chic receptionist, a woman who looked like she had been carved from ice, sitting behind a desk that resembled a fragment of a glacier. Her name, according to the small, severe plaque on her desk, was Ms. Vane. The name was fitting. Ms. Vane looked up as Mara approached. Her expression was a perfect, polite mask of disinterest that was somehow worse than open mockery. She judged in a single millisecond Mara's coat, her bag, her lack of jewelry, her rain-dampened hair, and she dismissed her as irrelevant. The look lasted less than a second, but Mara felt it like a slap. Mara walked toward the revolving glass doors. It was raining outside, a hard-driving November rain that turned the taxis on Park Avenue into frantic yellow blurs. She would have to wait. She moved to the side, standing near a towering leafless plant in a steel planter, trying to become as small and invisible as possible. She pulled out her phone. The battery was at 14%. She opened the Uber app, her fingers shaking slightly. The screen spun, connecting. The signal in the marble and steel canyon was terrible. No cars available. She tried Lyft. Connecting. The wheel spun and spun. Mara felt a pressure building in her chest. She was trapped. $50,000 and she could not even get a ride home. Ding! Mara's heart seized. She did not have to look. She could feel the sudden magnetic pull of his arrogance sucking the air out of her corner of the lobby. Marcus emerged from the elevator bank, adjusting his perfect silk tie. He saw her. Of course he saw her. He had an animal's instinct for weakness. And right now she was broadcasting it on every frequency. He sauntered over, a lazy, satisfied smile playing on his lips. His shoes clicked on the marble. Each step was deliberate. He was in no hurry. His tea time was a lie. It was pouring rain. This was his entertainment. This was the finale he had been waiting for. "Oh, you're still here." His voice was thick with false sympathy. "Tough getting a cab in this weather, I guess." Mara said nothing. She stared at her phone, at the useless spinning wheel. Come on," she whispered to the machine. The screen mocked her. Connecting. Nothing. "What's the plan?" Mara Marcus pushed, clearly enjoying this. "Waiting for the MT train. I hope you have a Metro card. Or is that part of the settlement?" He chuckled at his own joke. The sound echoed in the cavernous lobby. Miss Vane at her glacier desk glanced up. She was pretending to type, but her eyes were fixed on the scene. This was better than anything on her screen. This was live theater. "Don't tell me you can't even afford an Uber." Marcus's voice was dripping with mock concern. "That's just sad, Elle. Really sad." Mara's face flushed. She jammed her phone back into her bag, her eyes stinging. She would not cry. She would not give him that. But the humiliation was complete. This was what he wanted, to see her broken, to see her stranded, to know that he had won so thoroughly that she could not even leave the building with dignity. Here. Mara looked up. Marcus was reaching into the pocket of his trousers. He pulled out a thick folded wad of cash, his walking around money. The kind of money men like Marcus carried for tips and bribes and small emergencies. He peeled off a single crisp $100 bill. He held it out to her, waggling it between two fingers like a treat for a dog. Ms. Vane was definitely watching now. She had stopped pretending to type. Her face was blank, but her eyes were alive with interest. She would tell this story at dinner parties for years, for the ride. Marcus's voice was loud enough for the receptionist to hear. "Call it a parting gift. Go on, take it. You've earned something." This was it. This was the bottom. To be treated like a charity case, a panhandler by the man she had spent 12 years building, 12 years supporting, the man whose entire public persona, the cultured real estate mogul she had built from scratch. She had taught him which fork to use. She had taught him the difference between a Monet and a Manet. She had written the witty speeches he gave at benefits, the ones that got him on the boards of museums. And here he was offering her cab fare. "I'm not waiting for a taxi, Marcus." Her voice was low and tight. He blinked. His smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, right. Who's picking you up?" "That book club friend of yours. What's her name, Janet?" "In her 20-year-old Subaru." "That should be a fun ride back to wherever it is you're going. Someone is picking me up." Mara repeated the words like a mantra. Her voice was flat. She turned her back to him, facing the rain-lashed glass. The storm outside was a mirror of the storm inside her. "Ooh, a mystery," Marcus mocked. He leaned against a nearby marble pillar, crossing his arms. He was settling in. This is just too good. The great escape of Mara Sullivan. He pulled out his own phone, a brand-new $2,000 model, and started texting. His fingers moved fast. He was probably texting Candy, his new girlfriend, a 24-year-old fitness influencer. "You won't believe this. The ex is standing in the lobby like a drowned rat." Hilarious. Mara closed her eyes. She focused on her breathing. In, out, in, out. She thought of what he had said upstairs. "Your blog. 12 followers. It's pathetic." He did not know. He could not in his wildest dreams comprehend it. Aurelius's attic was pathetic. It was meant to be. It was the perfect, boring academic cover for her real work. The work she did on a completely different, encrypted, invitation-only forum. The work she did as Monsieur Sullivan, the anonymous online analyst who had for the last 3 years been the most respected and feared authenticator in the private art world. A minute passed. Then 2. The rain lashed against the glass in sheets. Marcus was still there, a smug gargoyle against the marble. 5 minutes. Mara's stomach clenched. He said he would be here. He promised. Marcus chuckled, pushing off the pillar. "Well, this has been fun, Elle, but I'm getting bored. Looks like your mystery ride is a no-show." "Shocking." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the $100 bill again. "Go on. Take it. Get yourself out of the rain." He tossed the bill onto the floor at her feet. It landed on a wet, muddy patch where people had shaken their umbrellas. The bill lay there soaking up dirty water, a perfect symbol of everything Marcus thought she was worth. "Call me when you're desperate." His voice was cold now, the mockery gone, replaced by certainty. "You will be." He started to walk toward the revolving door. His hand touched the glass, and just as he pushed, a new sound cut through the lobby's silence. It was not the sound of a taxi horn. It was not the sound of a bus. It was the sound of a very large, very expensive engine idling at a frequency so low you felt it in your bones before you heard it. Marcus stopped. He turned. Ms. Vane, the ICE receptionist who had seen presidents and oligarchs pass through these doors, actually stood up from her desk. Her face, for the first time all day, showed something other than disinterest. It showed awe. Through the rain-streaked glass a shape materialized. It glided to the curb with the silent, predatory grace of a panther. It was not a car. It was a statement. A Rolls-Royce Phantom long wheelbase in a shade of midnight blue so deep it looked black in the rain. It was not just new. It was custom. The kind of vehicle that did not suggest wealth. It suggested power. The kind of power that did not need to announce itself. Marcus's hand fell away from the door. His mouth opened slightly. "Damn. Must be Mr. Hicks. I heard he was getting a new one. He was talking to himself, to Mara, to anyone who would listen. He was impressed. And Mara could see a little jealous. It was a better car than his Maybach. Much better." The car sat at the curb, its engine a quiet, deep rumble. The rain seemed afraid of it. The water beat down and then fled from the flawless ceramic-coated paint. The spirit of ecstasy ornament on the hood seemed to glow with its own internal light, untouched by the storm. Then the driver's door opened. A man in a perfectly tailored black uniform and chauffeur's cap stepped out. He was tall, built like a former Special Forces operator, and moved with an efficiency that was almost military. He opened a large black reinforced umbrella, the kind that looked like it could stop a bullet, and walked not to the main revolving doors, but directly to the side door where Mara was standing. Marcus, who was still frozen mid-exit, physically pushed himself upright. His confusion was rapidly turning to shock. "He's not going for Hicks." The driver stopped exactly 3 feet from Mara. He was on the outside of the glass. She was on the inside. He did not speak. He just looked at her and gave a small, respectful nod. It was the nod of recognition, the nod of someone who knew exactly who she was and why he was here. Mara nodded back. The knot of fear in her stomach dissolved, replaced by a profound, steadying calm. She pushed the glass door open. The driver immediately angled the umbrella to cover her, shielding her from the downpour. He said nothing. There was no need for words. Marcus's jaw was now officially slack. He stood in the lobby, staring through the glass, watching as Mara, his useless, penniless ex-wife, was sheltered by a private driver from a $700,000 car. What the hell? But it was what happened next that shattered his reality. The driver did not open the car door for Mara. Instead, he turned and opened the rear door as if he had been waiting for a cue. And a man stepped out. He emerged from the car not in a hurry, but with a deliberate, unassailable calm. He emerged into the pouring rain as if the weather would not dare to inconvenience him. He was tall, with dark hair cut short and neat. He wore no tie, just a dark gray cashmere turtleneck under a bespoke Brunello Cucinelli overcoat that probably cost more than Mara's entire settlement. His face was sharp, intelligent, and held an expression of such profound, focused intensity that Marcus felt a jolt of actual physical fear. This was a man who did not just walk into rooms. He claimed them. Marcus knew this face. His blood ran cold. He felt a prickle of sweat on his neck despite the lobby's chill. He knew this face from the most exclusive high-stakes pages of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He knew it from hushed whispers at billion-dollar conferences in Silicon Valley. It was a face that appeared rarely in public and never without purpose. Julian Cross. The Julian Cross. the reclusive, almost mythical founder of Crosstech Logistics, the man who had revolutionized global shipping and data transfer, a man who bought and sold companies the way Marcus bought golf clubs, a man whose personal net worth was rumored to be north of $50 billion, a man Marcus's own firm Harrington Properties had been trying to get a meeting with just a 15-minute pitch for 18 months. They had been rejected, stonewalled, and ignored at every turn. What is happening? Marcus's mind was a screaming void. Is he here for Hicks? Did he just see Mara? Is this a mistake? Julian Cross ignored the rain. He ignored the driver. He ignored the entire city of New York. His gaze, intense and piercing blue, was locked on one person, and one person only. Mara. He walked toward her. The driver stayed by the car, holding the door. Marcus, his mind racing and failing, stumbled forward. He was a networker, a shark. This was an opportunity. He did not know what kind of opportunity, but his instincts addled as they were screamed at him to do something. He pushed through the door into the rain. His Zegna suit immediately began darkening, the expensive fabric soaking through. He jogged the few steps, a desperate, fawning smile plastered on his face. Mr. Cross, Marcus Harrington from Harrington Properties. I've been sending my prospectus to your office for Julian Cross did not even turn his head. He did not slow down. He did not acknowledge Marcus's existence in any way. He walked right past him as if Marcus were a piece of street furniture. A lamppost. A fire hydrant. Something beneath notice. Marcus stood there, rain pouring down his face. His expensive suit ruined his mouth, still open in mid-sentence. Julian Cross stopped in front of Mara. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. It was a smile of such genuine warmth and respect that it transformed his severe face. He looked at Mara the way Marcus had never looked at her, like she mattered. Mara. Julian's voice was a smooth, cultured baritone. I trust everything is concluded. Mara let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 12 years. The tension drained from her shoulders. The shame, the humiliation, the coldness of the lobby, it all evaporated like rain on hot pavement. Yes, Julian. Her voice was steady and clear. It's done. Good. He gestured to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. Then let's get you out of this rain. Your new life is waiting. Marcus's brain caught fire. He was rain-soaked now, his expensive hair plastered to his forehead. He looked pathetic. He was standing in a puddle. His $200 Italian leather shoes were ruined. Mara, you know, Mr. Cross. This is what is. Mara turned to look at him. She looked at this man who had called her useless, who had thrown a $100 bill at her feet. There was no anger in her eyes, no hatred. There was only pity. A cool, distant pity. The kind of pity you might feel for a stranger who has embarrassed themselves in public. You never listened to me, Marcus. Her voice was quiet, but it carried over the rain. You never once asked about my work. You just laughed. Marcus spluttered. Your work. Your blog. How does... He could not form a coherent sentence. His world was tilting. Nothing made sense. Mara and Julian Cross. Mara, who had 12 followers on a pathetic art blog. Mara, who was worth nothing. Mara, who he had just divorced for pocket change. And Julian Cross, the billionaire he had been chasing for over a year, was here. For her. It was then that Julian Cross finally acknowledged Marcus's existence. He turned his head slowly, his blue eyes narrowing. His gaze was not a gaze. It was a physical force. It was the look a biologist gives a specimen under a microscope just before dissecting it. He looked Marcus up and down from his soaked suit to his terrified, confused eyes. And then he spoke. Mr. Harrington. Marcus brightened desperately. Yes, Mr. Cross. We should talk. My firm has a proposal. Julian's voice dropped 10 degrees. You are the man who called my chief curator's research 16th century dirt. The words hit Marcus like a fist. Chief curator. The lobby spun. Mara was looking at him with that same pitying expression. Julian Cross's face was carved from stone. You are the man who dismissed the most brilliant mind in pigment analysis and art forensics I have ever encountered as a housewife." Julian took a step closer. Marcus, a man who intimidated everyone, who made hardened businessmen sweat in boardrooms, took an involuntary step back. His heel caught in a puddle. Water splashed up his leg. "And you are the man who," Julian's eyes flicked to the damp $100 bill lying on the pavement near the door, soaking in muddy water, "just tried to give a parting gift to a woman who, as of 9 o'clock this morning, has a research and acquisition budget of $200 million. The number hung in the air like a gunshot. Marcus's face went white. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. 200 million. The words made no sense. They were in English, but they belonged to a different reality, one where Mara was not his mousy ex-wife, but someone else entirely. Someone who mattered. Someone with power. Marcus's knees felt weak. He reached out to steady himself against the building's exterior wall. His palm came away wet. "Mara." The word came out as a croak. "You have your—" Julian turned his back on Marcus completely. The dismissal was so absolute, so final, that Marcus felt it like a physical blow. Julian placed a hand, gentle and respectful, on the small of Mara's back and guided her toward the car. The driver, who had remained silent and still throughout the entire exchange, stepped forward to hold the umbrella higher. Mara paused. Just for a second. She looked back at the man on the sidewalk, the man drowning in a puddle of his own arrogance. She could have said something. She could have twisted the knife. But she did not. She simply looked at him with that same cool, distant pity, and then she got into the car. Julian followed. The driver closed the door behind them. The sound was like a bank vault sealing a heavy, satisfying thunk that spoke of engineering and precision and money. So much money. Inside the car there was only silence. The rain hammering the city just inches away was completely inaudible. It was as if they had entered another dimension, one where storms did not exist. The car pulled away from the curb. Its movement was so smooth it felt like floating. It merged into the Park Avenue traffic with the ease of something that belonged there, something that owned the road. In seconds it was gone, swallowed by the gray curtain of rain. Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk. Miss Vane was still at her desk inside, watching through the glass. She had seen everything. Her expression had not changed, but Marcus knew she was filing every detail away. This story would travel. By tomorrow, every lawyer in Manhattan would know that Marcus Harrington's ex-wife had been picked up by Julian Cross. They would ask questions. They would wonder. And Marcus would have no answers. He looked down at the $100 bill still lying on the ground. The rain had turned it into a soggy mess. He bent down his suit, squelching, and picked it up. The bill tore in his hands. He stood there holding the pieces, water running down his face. He had never in his entire life felt so small. Inside the Rolls-Royce, the world was different. The interior was not just luxurious. It was a sanctuary. The leather was so soft it felt like butter. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood, and something else. Something expensive Mara could not name. The seats were heated and the warmth seeped into her bones, driving away the cold that had settled there during the divorce proceedings. She had been cold for 12 years. She had not realized it until now. Mara leaned her head back against the headrest and closed her eyes. The tension that had been coiled in her chest for hours, for days, for years, began to unwind. She felt it leaving her body in stages like ice melting. Her shoulders dropped. Her jaw unclenched. Her hands, which had been fists in her lap, opened. "Are you all right, Mara?" Julian's voice was gentle now. All the ice, all the lethal sharpness he had used on Marcus was gone. This was the voice she knew from late-night phone calls, from encrypted messages, from 3 years of conversations that had kept her sane when everything else in her life was falling apart. She opened her eyes and looked at him. I'm free. I am sorry for your ordeal." His face was serious. "He is a spectacularly small man." Mara almost laughed. The sound came out as something between a breath and a sob. "You have no idea." She turned in her seat to face him fully. "Are you sure you want me for this? Julian, after seeing what I came from—" Julian's expression shifted. For a moment he looked almost surprised, as if the question itself was absurd. Then he leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes intense and focused entirely on her. "Let me be precise. 3 years ago, I acquired a 15th century Dutch painting at a private auction. My own experts, the best at the Metropolitan Museum and the Smithsonian, were convinced it was a fake. The provenance was a mess. They told me I had wasted $40 million. Mara remembered. She remembered the forum post, the high-resolution images, the desperate plea for a second opinion. She had not known who Aurelius was then. She had not known he was a billionaire, or that the painting was real, or that her analysis would change everything. She had simply looked at the images and seen what others had missed. I was ready to accept their judgment. Julian's voice was quiet. I was ready to write off the entire purchase as a mistake. But then I found an anonymous online forum for art historians. There was a user named M. Sullivan engaged in a rather heated debate with a professor from Oxford about the use of azurite in early Renaissance work. Professor Miles. Mara smiled despite herself. He was insufferable and wrong. So I took a risk. I created an account. Aurelius. I posted high-resolution images of my supposed fake and asked one question: "What do you see?" Mara closed her eyes again, but this time it was not exhaustion. It was memory. She saw herself 3 years ago sitting at her kitchen counter at 2 in the morning while Marcus slept upstairs. She had clicked on the forum post expecting another routine authentication request. Instead, she had found something extraordinary. The images were stunning. Ultra-high resolution taken with museum-grade equipment. She could see every brushstroke, every crack in the varnish, every layer of paint. She had opened the files on her laptop and zoomed in, and in, and in. The painting revealed itself to her like a confession. She had spent 72 hours analyzing those images. She had looked at the chemical composition of the pigments, or at least what she could determine from the digital analysis. She had studied the crack lure, the fine network of cracks in the varnish and paint. She had examined the underdrawing visible in the infrared images Aurelius had provided, and she had seen it. The truth, hidden beneath 400 years of dirt and doubt. The painting was not a fake. It was a pastiche. Someone in the 17th century had painted over the sky, updating it to match the tastes of the time. But the figures, the hands, the faces, those were original. 15th century, the work of a master. And more than that, the work of a specific master's apprentice, someone history had forgotten, but whose technique was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. She had sent Aurelius a private message. It was not a fake. It's a pastiche. The sky was painted over in the 17th century, but the figures, the hands, the underdrawing, that's the lost work of Jan van Eyck's top apprentice. The signature isn't on the canvas. It's in the way he mixed lead tin yellow with his varnish. Look closer. 2 days later she received a reply. They looked. You were right. You just saved me $40 million. Who are you? That was 3 years ago. Julian's voice brought her back to the present. Your analysis, your expertise saved me from what would have been a career-defining mistake. You saw in 2 days what teams of experts with decades of experience couldn't see in 6 months. You, Mara Sullivan, saved my Vermeer. That painting is now the pride of my collection. And you are the only person I trust to manage it. The only one. He gestured out the window. The car was now on the FDR Drive, speeding toward the highway. The East River was a gray smear beside them. Your ordeal with Marcus Harrington is over. He was a temporary inconvenience. Your work is permanent. The Valerian Foundation's entire collection is now yours to command. The private jet is waiting at Teterboro. We'll be in San Francisco by morning. Your new apartment is ready. The restoration lab, the one you designed via email over the past 6 months, is fully stocked. The X-ray fluorescence spectrometer you wanted just arrived from Massachusetts yesterday. Mara looked down at her hands. They were resting in her lap, palms up. These hands that Marcus had mocked for not being manicured, for being stained with pigment during her grad school days, for being the hands of someone who did not matter. These hands that could see truth where others saw only surface. They were steady now, ready. He called my work dirt. The words came out soft, almost wondering. Julian's reply was immediate. We are all dirt, Mara. The only difference is what we choose to build with it. Marcus built a house of cards. You are building a cathedral. For the first time in more than a decade, Mara truly, completely smiled. Not the polite, tight smile she had perfected during her marriage, not the apologetic smile she gave when Marcus introduced her to his colleagues as his wife, nothing more. This was a real smile, one that came from somewhere deep inside, from a place she thought Marcus had killed years ago. Julian smiled back. Then he reached into the seat pocket in front of him and pulled out a tablet. He handed it to her. I may have done something this morning. You should know about it. Mara took the tablet. The screen showed a news article from the Wall Street Journal time-stamped 2 hours ago. The headline read, Cross-Tech Logistics acquires Apex Holdings in surprise move. She scrolled down. Apex Holdings, a mid-sized private equity firm, was the primary backer of Marcus's flagship project, the Harrington Tower. The firm held his construction loan, all $400 million of it. Mara looked up at Julian. Her voice was careful. Julian, what did you do? He met her gaze steadily. Nothing rash. Crosstech acquired Apex through a standard leveraged buyout. Perfectly legal, perfectly transparent. The deal closed at 8 this morning. We are now reviewing all of Apex's outstanding loans to determine which projects align with our long-term strategic interests. And Marcus's loan? Julian's smile was not warm. It was the smile of a shark. Let's just say that the Harrington Tower project may not align with our strategic interests. The loan comes up for renewal in 90 days. If Mr. Harrington cannot secure alternative financing, by then the loan will be called, all of it, and if he defaults, Crosstech will take possession of the asset. Mara felt something cold and bright move through her chest. Marcus had everything leveraged on that building. His company, his reputation, his entire financial future. If he lost it, he lost everything. Julian, he'll be ruined. Julian's voice was mild. He'll have 90 days to find new financing. That's more than enough time for a man of his supposed business acumen, unless, of course, his reputation precedes him. Unless, of course, the financial community decides that lending to Marcus Harrington is too great a risk. You're going to make sure they decide that. It was not a question. Julian inclined his head slightly. I'm going to make sure they have all the information they need to make an informed decision. Information tends to travel in certain circles, especially information about financial irregularities. Mara's breath caught. You know, I know many things. Julian's voice was still mild, but there was steel underneath. I know, for instance, that Apex Holdings was not the first firm to back the Harrington Tower project. I know that the original backers pulled out when they discovered certain accounting discrepancies. I know that Marcus found Apex only because they were desperate for high-profile investments and did not look too closely at his books. And I know that if someone were to examine those books carefully, they would find a great deal worth examining. Mara's mind raced. She thought of the ledgers Marcus had thrown at her 5 years ago. File these. Just numbers. Simple enough even for you. She thought of the spreadsheet she had built line by line over 3 years. The spreadsheet she had called, with grim humor, the Harrington Pastiche. She thought of the encrypted USB drive hidden in her hollowed-out art history book. The book Marcus had never opened, had never cared to open. I didn't send it to you. Julian's expression did not change. I know. You sent it to the Securities and Exchange Commission. 3 days ago. I have friends there. They were quite impressed by the thoroughness of the documentation. They called it the Rosetta Stone of white-collar crime. The case is being fast-tracked. Mara felt dizzy. She had sent the file on impulse the night after Marcus had brought Candy to the office party. She had watched him laugh with his mistress, watched him touch the small of Candy's back, the way he used to touch hers, back when they were young, and he had not yet learned to hate her. She had gone home, pulled out the USB drive, and encrypted the file 7 more times. Then she had sent it through an anonymous remailer to the SEC's Financial Fraud Division. She had not expected anyone to take it seriously. She had not expected anything. "Why are you helping me?" Julian leaned back in his seat. "Because 3 years ago, a woman I had never met took 72 hours out of her life to save me from a catastrophic mistake. She asked nothing in return. She did it because she saw a problem and solved it. Because she cared more about truth than about profit. Because she was brilliant and kind and utterly wasted on a man too stupid to see what he had." He paused. "And because when I did my research on M. Sullivan, when I finally tracked down who you were, I saw your situation. I saw Marcus Harrington's name on museum boards, giving speeches you had written, taking credit for knowledge you had taught him. I saw you disappearing into the background of his life, becoming smaller and smaller, until you were almost invisible. And I thought, what a waste. What a criminal waste. So when you messaged me 6 months ago and said you were ready to accept the position, I did not ask questions. I simply made sure that everything would be ready. The job, the lab, the apartment, the legal structure of the Valerian Foundation, and yes, the acquisition of Apex Holdings. I wanted to ensure that when you walked out of that divorce office, you walked into a new life. Completely. Irrevocably. No going back." Mara's throat felt tight. "Thank you does not seem adequate." "Then don't thank me." Julian's voice was firm. "Earn it. Do the work you were meant to do. Restore paintings. Authenticate masterpieces. Find the truth that others miss. Build that cathedral. That's all the thanks I need." The car was quiet for a moment. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on wet pavement. They were approaching the airport. Mara could see the signs for Teterboro. Private aviation. No security lines. No waiting. Just a plane and a future. "Julian, I need to ask you something. Anything. The evidence I sent to the SEC. It's detailed. Comprehensive. It shows years of financial fraud. Offshore accounts. Shell corporations. Falsified tax returns. If they prosecute, when they prosecute, Marcus will go to prison. Or at minimum, he'll be barred from the industry for life. Everything he built will be destroyed." She looked at Julian. "I need to know. Is that what you want? Or is this about protecting your investment?" Julian considered the question. His face was thoughtful. "Honestly, both. Marcus Harrington is a fraud and a criminal. He has stolen from investors, lied to partners, and broken laws that exist to protect people from men like him. He deserves to face consequences. That is justice." He paused. "But I am also a businessman. Marcus's company is failing because it was built on lies. If I allow Harrington Properties to collapse naturally, it will take down dozens of contractors, subcontractors, and small businesses that are owed money. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs, innocent people who did nothing wrong except work for the wrong company. So I am offering Marcus a choice. He can sell Harrington Properties to Crosstech at a fair market valuation. My people will restructure the company, honor the existing contracts, and save those jobs. Or he can fight, and I will call his loan, seize the assets, and let the SEC investigation proceed at full speed. Either way, Marcus Harrington loses his company. But one way, a lot of other people don't have to lose everything too." Mara absorbed this. "You're giving him an out. I'm giving him a choice." Julian's voice was cold. "I suspect he'll make the wrong one. Men like Marcus always do. Pride is more important than sense. But I'll sleep well either way." The car turned off the highway. The sign read, "Teterboro Airport, Private Aviation." The rain was lighter here, almost a mist. The car glided through a security gate that opened as they approached. On the tarmac ahead, a sleek white Gulfstream waited, its engines already running. The stairs were down. A flight attendant stood at the top waiting. Mara looked at the plane. Then she looked at Julian. In the 3 years they had corresponded online, she had built an image of Aurelius in her mind. She had imagined him as an older man, perhaps a retired academic or a wealthy collector with time and money to indulge his passion for art. She had never imagined this. A man her own age. A man who looked at her like she mattered. A man who had dismantled her ex-husband's life in a single morning, not out of spite but out of cold, calculated justice. "Who are you really?" Julian smiled. "A man who appreciates rare things, a man who does not like to see beauty wasted, and currently a man who is taking his new chief curator to see her laboratory." The car stopped beside the plane. The driver, who had not spoken during the entire journey, got out and opened Mara's door. The umbrella appeared again, shielding her from the rain. She stepped out onto the tarmac. The air smelled of jet fuel and possibility. She climbed the stairs. At the top, the flight attendant greeted her with a warm smile. "Dr. Sullivan, welcome aboard. Your suite is ready. We'll be taking off as soon as you're settled." Suite. Mara had flown on private jets before during her marriage to Marcus, but those had been charter flights crowded with other passengers, barely different from first class on a commercial airline. This was something else entirely. She stepped inside and stopped. The interior of the plane was more like a flying apartment than an aircraft. There were leather couches, a conference table, a full galley kitchen, and at the back, through an open door, she could see a bedroom with an actual bed made up with white linens and down pillows. The windows were large, and even in the gray light of the storm, the cabin felt bright and open. Julian boarded behind her. "Make yourself comfortable. It's a 5-hour flight. There's a shower in the bathroom if you want to wash away the day. Fresh clothes in the closet sized to fit. Or you can sleep. God knows you've earned it." Mara walked to one of the windows and looked out. She could see the Manhattan skyline in the distance, a jagged line of buildings disappearing into the clouds. Somewhere in that city, Marcus was standing in the rain trying to understand what had just happened to him. Somewhere in that city, the life she had lived for 12 years was ending, and here, 30,000 feet above it all, a new life was beginning. The plane began to taxi. Mara sat down on one of the leather couches. It was absurdly comfortable. Julian sat across from her. He opened a laptop and began typing. He was giving her space, she realized, giving her time to process. He was good at that. In 3 years of online conversations, he had always known when to push and when to wait. "Julian." He looked up from the laptop. "Why M. Sullivan? Why not your real name?" He smiled. "Why Aurelius? Why not mine?" Mara laughed. It felt strange laughing. She could not remember the last time she had laughed and meant it. Touché. The internet allows us to be who we really are without the baggage of who people expect us to be. Julian closed the laptop. "Online you were not Marcus Harrington's wife. You were M. Sullivan, art authenticator, genius solver of impossible problems. And I was not Julian Cross, billionaire, target of every pitch and scheme and desperate plea for funding. I was Aurelius, art lover, student seeker of truth. We could talk about pigments and varnishes and the proper way to analyze craquelure patterns without anyone expecting anything else from us. No pretense, no performance, just two people who loved art and loved the hunt for truth. Is that why you never told me who you were? Partially." He leaned forward. "But also because I wanted to be sure. I have money, Mara, a great deal of money. And money attracts people who want things. I needed to know that you cared about the work, not the salary. That you were passionate about restoration and authentication, not about what my name could do for your career. And in 3 years you never once asked me for anything. Not money, not introductions, not favors. You just analyzed paintings and shared your knowledge and argued with Professor Miles about azurite. You were real, and real is rare." The plane lifted off. The wheels left the tarmac, and for a moment Mara felt weightless. She watched the ground fall away. She watched the buildings shrink to toys, the streets to lines, the people to nothing. And then they were in the clouds, and there was only white and gray and the hum of the engines carrying her west. She thought about Marcus standing in the rain. She thought about the $100 bills soaking in a puddle. She thought about 12 years of making herself smaller, quieter, less. And she thought about the spreadsheet she had sent to the SEC, the one with every offshore account, every falsified document, every crime Marcus had committed, while she watched and documented and waited. "Julian, if the SEC prosecutes, they'll want to interview me. They'll want me to testify." "Probably." Julian's voice was calm. "Are you prepared for that?" Mara considered. Was she prepared to stand in a courtroom and tell the world what Marcus had done? Was she prepared to be cross-examined by his lawyers, to have her own life dissected, to be called vindictive and bitter and scorned? Was she prepared to watch Marcus be destroyed not by her hand, but by his own crimes finally coming to light? Yes. The word came out firm. "I'm prepared." Good. Because he will fight. He will lie. He will try to paint you as the villain. But the evidence does not lie. And you documented everything. Every transaction, every account number, every falsified signature. You built a case that is airtight. All you have to do is tell the truth. The truth. Mara turned the word over in her mind. For 12 years she had lived Marcus's truth, his version of reality. She was useless. She was boring. She had no value. She should be grateful for his generosity. And she had believed it, or at least she had stopped fighting it. It was easier to be quiet than to argue. Easier to be invisible than to be mocked. But the truth was different. The truth was that she had a PhD in Renaissance art history. The truth was that she had given up a fellowship at the Getty to support Marcus's career. The truth was that she had written every speech, managed every social calendar, opened every door that Marcus had walked through. The truth was that she was M. Sullivan, one of the most respected art authenticators in the world, sought after by museums and collectors and billionaires who needed someone who could see what others missed. The truth was that Marcus had not made her. She had made him. And now without her, he was going to fall. The plane climbed through the clouds. Mara pressed her forehead against the window. The glass was cold. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The cold, the hum of the engines, the knowledge that she was flying toward something instead of away from something. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt hope. Mara woke to sunlight. For a moment, disoriented, she did not know where she was. The bed beneath her was too comfortable. The sheets were too soft. The air smelled wrong, clean and filtered instead of the stale apartment scent she had grown accustomed to. Then memory returned in a rush. The divorce. The lobby. Julian. The plane. She sat up. She was still wearing the clothes from yesterday, the department store coat discarded on a chair. Through the window beside the bed she could see blue sky and wisps of cloud. They were still flying. She checked her watch. 7 in the morning East Coast time. 4 in the morning where they were headed. There was a soft knock on the door. The flight attendant's voice came through, professional and quiet. "Dr. Sullivan will be landing in 30 minutes. There's coffee and breakfast in the main cabin when you're ready." Mara stood. Her body ached from tension she had not realized she was carrying. She found the bathroom small but perfectly appointed and washed her face. The woman in the mirror looked tired, but different somehow. Lighter. She tried to identify what had changed and realized it was her eyes. For 12 years her eyes had been dead. Now they were alive. She found fresh clothes in the closet exactly as Julian had promised. Dark jeans that fit perfectly, a soft cashmere sweater in charcoal gray. Everything was her size down to the shoes. She changed quickly, folding her old clothes and leaving them on the bed. She did not want them anymore. They belonged to a different person. In the main cabin, Julian was already awake, sitting at the conference table with a laptop and several files spread out in front of him. He looked up when she entered. "Sleep well? Better than I have in years." "Good." He gestured to the galley. "Coffee's fresh. Maria makes excellent eggs if you're hungry." Mara poured herself coffee from a silver carafe. The cup was bone china, delicate and expensive. She held it carefully, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. Through the window she could see the landscape below beginning to shift. Mountains gave way to valleys, valleys to coastline. They were descending. Julian closed his laptop. "I should prepare you for what you're walking into." The Valerian Foundation is not a small operation. We have a staff of 32 people, including conservators, researchers, archivists, and administrative support. Most of them have been with the foundation since we launched 2 years ago. They're good at their jobs, passionate, dedicated. But, but they don't know you yet. You're coming in as chief curator, which means you outrank everyone except me. Some of them applied for your position. Some of them think they deserved it. You're going to have to prove yourself." Mara sipped her coffee. It was perfect, strong and smooth. "I'm used to proving myself." "I know." Julian's expression was serious. "But this is different. At home you had to prove yourself to Marcus, who had no interest in seeing your value. Here you have to prove yourself to people who care deeply about art and have their own ideas about how things should be done. They'll test you, they'll challenge you, and if you're not careful, they'll undermine you. What do you suggest? Show them what you can do. Don't tell them about your credentials or your publications or your years of study. Show them. Pick the most difficult authentication problem we have and solve it, publicly, definitively. Make them see that you're not here because you're my friend or because I owed you a favor. You're here because you're the best, and if they still don't accept me, then they can find other employment." Julian's voice was flat. "I'm not running a democracy, Mara. I'm running a foundation dedicated to preserving and understanding art. I need the best people in every position. You are the best curator I've ever encountered. If the staff can't see that the problem is with them, not you." The plane began its final descent. Mara could see the San Francisco Bay now, a vast expanse of gray-blue water dotted with sailboats. The Golden Gate Bridge emerged from the morning fog, its towers reaching toward the sky like iron prayers. The city spread out beyond it, white and gold in the early light. "It's beautiful. Wait until you see the lab." Julian's face brightened. "We built it to your exact specifications. Every piece of equipment you requested. Every safety measure you outlined. The climate control system alone cost $2 million. But it's worth it. We're housing some of the most valuable paintings in private hands. They deserve the best care." The plane touched down at San Francisco International with barely a bump. Through the window, Mara could see a black SUV waiting on the tarmac. The same driver from yesterday, the one Julian had called Arthur, stood beside it. They deplaned into cool morning air that tasted of salt and possibility. Arthur greeted them with a nod and opened the rear door. The drive into the city took 40 minutes. Julian pointed out landmarks. The financial district still mostly dark at this hour. The ferry building, its clock tower illuminated. The bay stretching endlessly to the east. Then they climbed into the hills, into a neighborhood of Victorian mansions and tree-lined streets. Pacific Heights. Arthur turned onto a quiet block and stopped in front of a building that took Mara's breath away. It was modern, all glass and steel, rising 8 stories from the hillside. But it was designed to complement the historic homes around it with setbacks and terraces that broke up its height. And through the glass walls she could see paintings, dozens of them even from the street. "Welcome to the Valerian Foundation." They rode an elevator to the top floor. The doors opened directly into the laboratory, and Mara understood immediately why Julian had spent $2 million on climate control. The space was vast, easily 3,000 square feet, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offering panoramic views of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge. But the windows were not just windows. They were UV filtering glare, reducing temperature-controlling barriers between the art and the outside world. Inside, the air was exactly 68 degrees and 45% humidity. Perfect. The equipment was arranged with the precision of a surgical suite. An X-ray fluorescent spectrometer top of the line sat in one corner. Beside it, an infrared reflectography system. There were microscopes, both optical and electron, a fume hood for working with solvents, a photography station with professional lighting, workbenches with soft padding for examining paintings, storage racks for canvases awaiting restoration. Everything Mara had dreamed of having, and more. My God. Julian was watching her face. "Do you approve?" "Approve. This is..." She could not find words. "This is perfect. Then let's get to work." Julian walked to a secure storage room at the back of the lab. He entered a code and the door swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, Mara could see climate-controlled storage racks holding dozens of paintings in various states of conservation. Julian pulled out a medium-sized panel about 3 feet by 2 feet and carried it carefully to one of the workbenches. "This is your first assignment. It's called the Duchess of Orléans at Prayer." Attributed to a minor 16th-century French court painter named Philippe de Champagne's studio. We acquired it 6 months ago from a private collector in Boston. It's competent but uninspiring, exactly the kind of devotional work that was mass-produced for minor nobility. He set it on the bench under the lights. Mara looked at it. A pale woman in dark robes, hands clasped, eyes downcast. Technically proficient but lifeless. Boring. But there was something about it, something in the way the light hit the surface. Or so everyone thinks. Julian's voice was carefully neutral. But when we did the initial condition report, something seemed off. The varnish is unstable in places, the craquelure pattern doesn't match the supposed age, and there's what looks like pentimenti in the sleeves, changes the artist made during painting. Pentimenti. Mara leaned closer. They were visible if you knew where to look. Faint lines beneath the surface where the artist had changed their mind, painted over an earlier attempt. But pentimenti in a mass-produced devotional painting that suggested an artist who cared about getting it right, who was willing to revise and improve. That suggested someone with more talent than a studio hack. "What do you think it is?" "I think someone painted over something much more interesting." Julian's eyes met hers. "I think there's another painting underneath this one, something someone wanted to hide, and I think you're the person who can find it." Mara felt her pulse quicken. This was what she was born to do, not managing social calendars or organizing catering or making herself small. This, finding truth, revealing what had been hidden. She ran her fingers lightly over the surface of the painting, feeling the texture of the brush strokes, the slight variations in the varnish layer. "How long do I have?" "As long as you need." Julian pulled out his phone. "But the staff meeting is in 2 hours. It would be impressive if you could give them a preliminary analysis by then." 2 hours. Mara looked at the painting, at the equipment surrounding her, at the windows overlooking the bay. 2 hours to prove she belonged here. 2 hours to show Julian's staff that she was not just some dilettante curator hired on a whim. 2 hours to begin the work she had been preparing for her entire life. "I'll need complete silence and no interruptions. You'll have both." Julian moved toward the elevator. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." "Good luck, Mara." The elevator doors closed. Mara was alone with the painting and the morning light and the hum of the climate control system. She took a deep breath and began. First, the X-ray fluorescence spectrometer. She positioned the painting carefully and began scanning section by section. The XRF would show her the chemical composition of the pigments layer by layer. It took 30 minutes to complete a full scan. The results appeared on the monitor, a rainbow of false colors showing different chemical signatures. And there it was. Beneath the dull browns and grays of the visible painting, a completely different palette. Brilliant blues, rich reds, yellows that practically glowed. Someone had painted over a much more vibrant work with deliberately dull colors. Someone had hidden a masterpiece. Mara moved to the infrared reflectography system. This would show her the underdrawing, the initial sketch the artist had made before applying paint. She positioned the camera and began capturing images. It took another 40 minutes. When she loaded the images onto the computer and adjusted the contrast, her hands began to shake. The underdrawing was not the work of a studio assistant or a competent craftsman. It was the work of a master. The lines were confident, economical, perfect. Each stroke showed absolute certainty. And the composition beneath the boring devotional portrait was something else entirely. A woman, yes, but not praying. Painting. She held a brush in one hand and a palette in the other. Her face was not downcast in piety. It was lifted, looking directly at the viewer with an expression of fierce intelligence and barely contained defiance. Mara checked the clock. 90 minutes gone. She had 30 minutes left. She needed one more confirmation. She moved to the microscopy station and took samples of the varnish and paint from several areas. Under magnification, the truth became clearer. The overlying paint was cheap, applied hastily with inferior materials. But the underlying paint was expensive. Real ultramarine. Lead tin yellow, vermilion, the kind of pigments that cost as much as gold in the 16th century. She had found it. A hidden painting probably created by a woman artist whose work was considered too bold, too challenging. Someone had covered it with an acceptable image, something that could be sold or displayed without causing offense. But the original was still there waiting, screaming to be seen. 20 minutes left. Mara compiled her findings into a brief report, screenshots from the XRF and infrared scans, her analysis of the pigments and brushwork. She sent it to the printer and gathered the pages just as the elevator chimed. Julian stepped out, followed by 12 people. The staff. They filed into the lab, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 60s. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. One, a woman in her 50s with severe gray hair pulled back in a bun, looked openly hostile. This must be Dr. Eleanor Vance, the senior conservator Julian had mentioned. She had been with the foundation since its inception and had applied for the chief curator position. Everyone. This is Dr. Mara Sullivan, our new chief curator. Julian's introduction was brief. Dr. Sullivan, the team. Mara did not try to shake hands or make small talk. She simply turned to the painting on the bench. Thank you all for coming. I know you have questions about my appointment. I'm going to answer them by showing you what I found in the last 2 hours. She distributed copies of her report. Then she pulled up the images on the large monitor mounted on the wall. The X-ray fluorescent scan appeared, showing the hidden palette beneath the surface. Several people leaned forward. Dr. Vance's expression shifted from hostile to interested. The Duchess of Orleans at prayer is a forgery, not in the sense that it's a fake meant to deceive. It's a cover. Someone in the late 16th or early 17th century deliberately painted over an earlier work. Based on the pigment analysis and the quality of the underdrawing, I believe the original painting is by a woman named Marina de Luca, an Italian artist active in the 1580s. She's mentioned in exactly one shipping manifest from Venice. Her work was considered too bold for the period, and most of it was destroyed or painted over. Mara switched to the infrared reflectography images. But she was a genius. Look at this underdrawing. Look at the confidence of the lines, the composition, the subject matter. This is not a devotional painting. This is a self-portrait of a woman artist at work. It's an act of defiance. And someone couldn't tolerate it, so they buried it under an acceptable image of a pious duchess. The room was silent. Everyone was staring at the monitor. Even Dr. Vance looked stunned. How certain are you 95%? Mara met her eyes steadily. I'll need to do more tests, take more samples, consult the archives. But the pigments, the technique, the style, they all match what little we know of Marina de Luca's work. If I'm right, this is the only surviving painting of hers in the Western Hemisphere, possibly in the world. And if you're wrong, Dr. Vance's voice was challenging but no longer hostile. If you remove the overpainting and there's nothing underneath or it's damaged, we'll have destroyed a perfectly good 16th century painting. Then I'll take full responsibility. Mara did not flinch. But I'm not wrong. The evidence is clear. This painting has been hiding in plain sight for 400 years. It's time to let it breathe. Dr. Vance studied her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly she smiled. It was a small smile, grudging but genuine. Welcome to the Valerian Foundation, Dr. Sullivan. I look forward to working with you. The rest of the staff echoed her sentiment. The tension in the room eased. They began asking technical questions which Mara answered with precision and confidence. Yes, she would document every step of the restoration. Yes, they would consult with experts at the Smithsonian and the Metropolitan Museum. Yes, she would publish the findings in a peer-reviewed journal. This was not just about the foundation, this was about art history. Julian watched from the side of the room, saying nothing. But when Mara glanced at him, he nodded once. Approval, pride. The meeting broke up after an hour. The staff returned to their various projects, energized and excited. Dr. Vance lingered. I owe you an apology. I thought Julian hired you as a favor or because, well, I was wrong. That analysis was extraordinary. Thank you. Mara felt genuine warmth toward this woman who had been prepared to hate her but was professional enough to admit error. I hope we can work together. I'm certain we will. Dr. Vance gestured at the painting. When do you want to start the restoration tomorrow? Today I need to rest. And I need to find my apartment. Dr. Vance smiled again. You're going to love it. Julian doesn't do anything halfway. She left. Julian approached the bench, looking at the painting with new eyes. 400 years, hidden, waiting. Truth is always there, Mara. Her voice was soft, hidden under layers of lies. My job? Remove the lies. Let truth breathe. Julian looked at her. That's why you're here. That's why I spent 2 years building this foundation and 6 months waiting for you to be ready to join it. Because the world needs people who can see through the lies, who care enough to dig for truth. He paused. And speaking of truth, I got a call this morning from Marcus's lawyer. Already. Apparently Marcus spent the weekend trying to secure alternative financing for the Harrington Tower. No one will touch him. Word has gotten around that Crosstech is calling his loan, and when Crosstech calls a loan, it's because they've seen something in the books that concerns them. Every bank in New York is suddenly very interested in Marcus Harrington's financial history, the SEC investigation, not public yet. But information leaks. It always does, especially when the investigation is into someone who has made a lot of enemies over the years. Marcus burned bridges everywhere he went. Now those bridges are staying burned. What did his lawyer want? To make a deal. Marcus will sell Harrington properties to Crosstech for $200 million, well below market value. In exchange, Crosstech agrees to honor all existing contracts and keep the current employees. And Marcus gets to walk away quietly, no prosecution, no public scandal. Mara absorbed this. That's generous. It's business. Julian's voice was neutral. $200 million is a fair price for a failing company with good assets. And I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in preserving jobs and making sure Marcus can't hurt anyone else. What did you tell him that I'd consider it? I have a counteroffer. $300 million for the company, all employees kept, all contracts honored. But Marcus has to resign immediately and sign a non-compete agreement. He can never work in real estate development again in the United States. He takes the money, disappears, and lives quietly somewhere else. And if he refuses, then the loan gets called in 90 days. The company goes into receivership, and the SEC investigation proceeds without any interference from me. Marcus will lose everything and probably go to prison. His choice. Will he take it? Julian shrugged. Men like Marcus don't think clearly when their pride is wounded. He'll probably fight. He'll hire lawyers and try to find leverage and convince himself he can still win. But he can't. The numbers don't lie. His company is failing. His crimes are documented. His time is up. Mara looked out the window at the city spread below them. Somewhere out there, Marcus was waking up to his new reality. His marriage was over. His company was under threat. His crimes were being investigated. And the woman he had dismissed as worthless was standing in a multi-million-dollar laboratory about to restore a masterpiece he would never have recognized. Do you feel guilty? The question surprised her. She thought about it carefully. No, I feel free. For 12 years I made myself small to fit into Marcus's life. I gave up my fellowship, my research, my career. I wrote his speeches and managed his social calendar and taught him how to pretend to be cultured. I built him into someone people respected, and he never once thanked me, never once asked what I wanted, never once saw me as anything other than an accessory. She turned from the window. So no, I don't feel guilty. I documented his crimes because they were crimes. I sent the evidence to the SEC because it was the right thing to do. And I'm here because this is where I belong. If Marcus loses everything, it's not because of me. It's because of him. Julian's expression was unreadable. Good. Because over the next few months, things are going to get ugly. Marcus is going to fight. He's going to hire investigators to dig into your past, into our relationship, into everything. He's going to try to paint you as vindictive and me as complicit. The press is going to have a field day when the story breaks. I'm ready. Are you? Because once this starts, there's no stopping it. The SEC investigation will become public. Marcus's crimes will be front-page news. Your name will be attached to it. People will want to interview you, dissect your marriage, speculate about your motives. You'll be judged and criticized and defended and attacked. It's going to be exhausting. Mara thought about the painting on the bench. Marina DeLuca, whose work had been deemed too bold, too challenging, too much. Marina, who had painted anyway, who had created a masterpiece knowing it would probably be destroyed or hidden. Marina, who had left her defiant self-portrait buried under layers of acceptable mediocrity, waiting for someone 400 years later to find it and bring it to light. I spent 12 years being invisible. Her voice was steady. Now I spend my life making invisible women seen. If that comes with criticism and judgment and attack, so be it. I'm done hiding. Julian smiled. Then let's get to work.